Good morning, everybody. Welcome to high-level technical session number 9, the Transforming Transportation 2021. This session's theme is about future mobility for the post-revolution and non-contact era. This session is jointly organized by World Bank and 3 Korean institutions, Korean Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Seoul Metropolitan Government, and Korea Research Institute, KOTI, Korea Transport Institute, I'm sorry. And I think first of all, my name is Jaehak. I am the president of Korea Transport Institute. I'm very glad to moderate this session this morning. I think this session will present and discuss about the various issues on the future mobility in relation to post-industrial revolution and also the non-contact era in transport sectors. First of all, I'd like to introduce the 5 panelists in this session. The introduction order is the speaking order. So please remember you are the order of speaking. First of all, the Professor Hwang.
Hi.
Professor.
Good.
Hi. Professor Hwang is currently professor of the Hongik University. He was also the president of Korea Transport Institute. Nice to see you. And the second is Steve Perkins of the International Transport Forum of OECD. Nice to see you. He's in charge of the research, head of the research and the policy. Okay. And the third panel is the director Changgi. He's the director Changgi is the currently director of the Korean Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Transport. And the first panel is the director Jindong Kang. He is the director of Seoul Metropolitan Government. He's in charge of the Department of the Transport Operations. And the fifth final one is the Almud Weitz. He's the practice manager of the World Bank. Nice to meet you. First of all, I'd like to ask the Professor Hwang about the general insight of the future mobility in relation to post-industrial revolution, and also I think it's some review about the review about the general impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in transport sector. Can you start with how the Korean government responding to the pandemic and preparing for the future mobility? Professor Hwang.
Thank you for introduction, and I'm going to start with just general overview of the how Koreans responded to COVID-19. Before I concretely mentioning about Korean responsibility or responses to that COVID-19, I'd like to just generally explain to you what really happened in Korea. Thanks to Korea's outstanding digital infrastructure, COVID-19 has shifted the lives of Koreans from offline to online. According to a study done by Job Korea in spring last year, 62% of Korean office workers experienced telecommuting.
Mhm.
71% of whom hoped to continue working from home even after COVID-19. With the increase in telecommuting, the online shopping has also surged 76%, and food and beverage delivery has soared over 50%. As telecommuting spread, demand for long-distance city travel modes such as subways and buses fell by more than 25%, while demand
Mhm.
for short-distance individual travel modes such as shared bicycles and e-scooters increased by up to 93% year on year, while demand for major subway stations around the city center where workplaces are concentrated, decreased by 50% year on year. Activities around residential areas increased by up to 15%, and visits to parks in particular skyrocketed to 158%. Korea's economic growth rate last year stood at minus 1% as economic activity is dampening by the COVID-19. Although it was better than other OECD countries, private consumption decreased minus 5%, and many small business and self-employed people working in transportation and food service business have been suffering from severe difficulties. Since November last year, the third COVID-19 trend has begun and social distancing regulations have been raised to 2.5 levels, allowing restaurant operations to receive only 4 or fewer customers by 9 p.m. This has almost halted night activities in the city, and the subway, bus, and taxi industries have also suffered massive damage. According to the Seoul Transportation Corporation, the total number of subway users dropped more than 27% on year last year, bringing the operation deficit to approximately to $1 billion. On the other hand, car sales rose 6.2% year on year as more people bought cars due to concerns over infection by using public transportation. And the size of Korean car market rose from 12th to 9th in the world. If this phenomenon continues, Korean cities will be suffering a plunge in quality of life due to traffic congestion and vehicle-related air pollution. It is time for disruptive innovation in Korea to regain the
Mhm.
competitiveness of public transportation before COVID-19 level. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. You said the Korea is quite relatively quite well responded, well performed against the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. But I think you said the also the transport industry also very hard hit. Even
Sure.
if the Korea performed very well, you said. Thank you very much. I think I the Steve, I think it's the last year the ITF it was quite regrettable to you didn't make the what is the annual the summit International Transport Forum summit in Leipzig. I was actually very much expecting even via the what is the online the what is the seminar, but I believe that this year you will do it, certainly, I think. So what is the general topics in the issues, the what is of the this year's International Transport Forum in Leipzig, and also what is your view on the future mobility policies and strategies, and also also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to transport sector.
Yeah, hello, Jaehak, and hello to everybody. It's fantastic to be part of transforming transportation this year, even though we're constrained to be virtual, and it's a strain for people to be up really early in the morning in DC or really late at night in other parts of the world. but it's great to have this contact. And yeah, it's a shame that we had to postpone our summit from last year, but we will indeed be holding it this year in the usual third week of May, 25th to the 27th, one way or another, part virtual, no doubt. And COVID, of course, has been a big issue for us all through the year, and it still will be at the summit. We've been working to facilitate discussions between our ministers, comparing experience and how they've been responding to the COVID crisis. And that started back last March with a paper we discussed between ministers, particularly on the experience, the fantastic experience in Bogota with Claudia Lopez and Nicolas Estupiñán, with their respacing of the city and reallocation of space to cycling in particular to deal with the immediate shift in demand. And Paris, our own city where we're based, has also been a pioneer and done an awful lot in that area. And the latest paper we'll be releasing tomorrow that we've recently discussed with ministers is in how we build back better and where to focus investment to relaunch the economy in ways that deliver employment and adaptation compatible with sustainable mobility rapidly. And of course, that focuses on the projects that are already in development. Back in Bogota, as we heard in the opening session, there have a lot of metro investments in the pipeline, and to stick with those plans is critical because we need to improve the quality of public transport as we go forward. As Dr. Hwang just said, if we don't take measures to improve the quality, the reliability, the space available in public transport, we will end up with a chaotic system on the roads. And it's maintenance, it's projects that are quick and already envisaged that can be brought forward a little bit rather than imagining we can launch mega projects quickly because they just cannot be delivered in the timescales necessary. But shifting to new mobility, the real subject of this session, what we're doing at the moment is in 4 areas. We're facilitating discussions between the regulators and the operators of new mobility services. And as, of course, we're providing a space for the regulators, our governments at city and national level to share experience and good practice of where they're getting to. We're looking at 4 areas at the moment on integrating mobility as a service into public transport, in innovative mobility services for the periphery, where it's particularly difficult to deliver public transport services sustainably from the financial point of view, on regulating micromobility to maximize its potential to contribute to the ecosystem of more sustainable and equitable urban mobility, and on preparing infrastructure for autonomous mobility. Maybe I can say a bit more about those things a little bit later, but I think the first question that comes up, especially in transforming transportation, is any of this stuff relevant to cities in Africa, particularly in the lowest income countries? But I think the answer is definitely yes. We've seen some very good examples in previous transforming transportations. 2 years ago, there was a big spotlight on Where is My Transport, starting off in South Africa in Cape Town, where they took what was a pretty chaotic microbus and taxi system, which is the backbone of getting particularly lower income people to work, where there was no network plan. It was very, it's difficult to organize your journeys, and using mobile phone data, they made it effectively a digital virtual network, route network, to facilitate finding trips, and that could be developed onto reserving places on buses and so on. Something that's happened already in Mexico City, a big city where 80% of people depend on public transport, and the vast majority is on rather poorly regulated microbuses. There's been a number of companies that have entered the market there using apps to be able to put a bit more order and quality into the services that are being provided. Basically, you can use their app to reserve a place away from the typical crowded, chaotic bus station where you have to queue for hours and then fight for a place on a bus. We saw a great picture yesterday in the opening session from Andrew Steer of a city in Africa with a very actually good quality bus depot or bus station. A lot of buses liveried all in the same yellow. So clearly there's quite a bit of organization there, and good quality vehicles. But if you had to find your bus in that mass of vehicles, it's going to take you half an hour to get to the bus you need. So back in Mexico, what they've done is you can use an app to book a place on a bus away from those traditional pickup spots. You can reserve your space so you're not having to squeeze onto an overloaded, dangerously overloaded, sometimes certainly insecure environment, particularly for women. You can have a booked seat with no more people than seats on the bus. You can find a route that takes you directly to where you're going rather than to have to change 1 or 2 times for a very small premium added to the price. And behind the scenes, the companies like Jetty, Urban, there's several operators now, negotiate with the suppliers of the microbus service. They're not replacing them. It's not totally disruptive. They negotiate to use good quality vehicles which meet safety standards, and to actually pay the drivers a wage rather than having them paid by fighting for customers and taking their wages from the ticket from the sales. So that's a very relevant application of digital technology worldwide as the use of mobile phones becomes ubiquitous, to increase the quality, the reliability, the safety, the security of the public transport system at very low cost.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. You introduced the very various the cases and experiences in the of the many cities in all over the world. Thank you very much. The Director Lee, Changgi Lee, I think the Korean government the last July announced so-called the Korea New Deal plan. Namely digital transformation and the green transformation and the human resource development, something like that, or social
safety net.
Social safety net, something like that. So
Yes.
I think the Korean New Deal is very, very much important, not only to deal with to cope with the crisis of the pandemic, but also the future economic future economic transformation, so-called the digital economy, toward the digital economy, and also the green economy. So in relation to the future mobility, what is the Korean government preparation and the plan in relation to the Korean New Deal project actually? In your government, what do you think about that? Yeah.
Okay, the Korean government actually developed the New Deal plan as a response to the COVID-19 and the economic crisis incurred by this COVID-19 pandemic. So, and the plan itself consists of the 3 pillars, like the digital New Deal and the green New Deal and social safety net. And where the big picture is that investing $7 billion in digital and green New Deal strategy to create 550,000 jobs until 2025. And where so in green New Deal, green New Deal is kind of actually aiming at decarbonization. So where in terms of transportation, so the goal is to shifting from the internal combustion engine based vehicles to electronic vehicles and hydrofuel cell vehicles. So we are now investing huge amount of money in researches in those areas, and we are providing subsidies on those vehicles, and so also subsidize the charging stations. And so the goal is to increasing the stock of the electronic vehicles more than 1 billion, and stock of hydrofuel vehicles more than 200,000 by 2025. Considering that currently the registered vehicles, number of the registered vehicles is kind of 24 million. So yeah, 1 million is kind of 5%, I think. Yeah, so yeah, that's the scheme in the Green New Deal. So, and the other part is the digital New Deal. So this is more about the automated vehicles and connected vehicles. So we are aiming to commercialize level 4 vehicles that doesn't require the involvement of any drivers in 2027. So for this purpose, we are actually investing on regulations and technologies and trying to having the prototypes in 2024. And we also want to, we was trying to upgrade the infrastructures. So we are currently now working on the CITS system. So CITS system is the cooperative ITS intelligent transport system. So it gives the safety information to vehicles from infrastructure or vehicle to vehicle by real-time communications. So it requires its own the communication units, and it should be installed on the roadside. And right now, from this year, we'll install those the infrastructure on the roadside. So it'll give the real-time signals to vehicles directly. So not just giving it to the it's like that. So automated vehicles can now getting signals, the signal information directly to the computers. So they can now not just rely on their sensors, but they can have this communication technology. So it will enhance the safety, and it will allow those vehicles to drive in the urban areas. So yeah, it will kind of accelerate the introduction of automated vehicles in urban areas. And the other thing is we are now conducting R&D projects. So on areas that the private sector might not be interested, such as the truck platforming and the public buses. So we are trying to automate the bus rapid transit. So we're going to have the fully automated bus rapid transit system in maybe Seoul, maybe in a few years. KOTI is actually conducting this research.
Thank you.
These are the areas, and then where there was kind of impact from COVID-19, surely. So, but yeah, we had some delays in our researches because of the COVID-19. But yeah, we are gonna working on this, and then we have the CITS pilot test zones in 4 cities, including Seoul government. So we have operation in Seoul too, and we have operations in Jeju Island. So it's like more than 2,000 rental cars in Jeju Island are now equipped with the CITS system. So they are getting those signals. It has a huge impact on the tourism there, because you know that the tourists there are rented cars, but they are not familiar with the region. But so because of this CITS, they can get the signals and how many time remaining in their green light and red light. So that is actually helpful. So now more and more rental car companies are actually requesting for us to provide more units. So that's what's happening now. Yeah, and so yeah, these are kind of what we are now trying to using this New Deal investment to transform, you know, the Korean transportation system to kind of more connected, automated, and with electronic vehicles and hydrogen fuel vehicles. That's our strategy.
Okay, thank you. I think you are saying the Korea is moving on very hard, working very hard to transform the transportation system, and also change toward the green transport as well. I think so. The Korean New Deal project is very important in transforming the transport industry and also systems in the future, I think. Okay. Let's go to the Seoul Metropolitan Government. I think Seoul Metropolitan Government, the public transportation system in Seoul City is very famous, you see. because it's the high, the modal split, also the high quality of service, and also the very cheap, I say, compared with the quality service. But many people actually in the beginning of the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, many people worried about the public transportation might be hard hit because of the fear of the infection. Okay, so can you explain how the Seoul City government react to the pandemic to ensure public transport is safe to use? Actually, according to my understanding, there was no evidence. Actually, the people are infected during their journey in public transportation. Actually, you see. So the Director Kang, can you explain about actually what has been done by the city government to cope with the pandemic in the last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, it's an honor to see you. Yeah. Thank you for having me here to discuss the future transportation after COVID-19 with renowned experts. I hope this session will be meaningful to effectively overcome the COVID-19 crisis and discuss how the future of mobility looks like in the future. This pandemic was changing our daily lives. Infection risk made people try to avoid taking public transportation, and then the ridership has decreased by maximum 35% than usual. In this crisis, SMG has kept trying to provide a safe public transportation. In megacity Seoul, 13 million people on average use public transportation every day. Fortunately, Seoul has been making an effort to make public transportation safe, recording zero infection with zero suspension. From now on, I'm going to share a case on how Seoul effectively responded to the COVID-19. First, special transportation system for inbound passengers. The number of confirmed cases was skyrocketed outside of Korea, and effective control of the inflow of people could be the first measure to be taken. So, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, so Metropolitan Government and Autonomous District in Seoul together established a cooperative system called Special Transport for Inbound Passengers. The MOLIT made the inside of the airport by investigating passengers from the immigration. SMG was in charge of transporting the confirmed cases. The two COVID-19 screening clinics located in 25 autonomous districts to diagnose them. After the inspection, each autonomous district sent them to their residence for self-quarantine. This close collaboration from the airport to the door became a complete system to stop spreading the virus infection. In addition, private idle resources such as airport buses and foreign tourist taxis, which were almost suspended due to reduced demand for inbound passengers, were used as exclusive transportation. As a result, since April last year, about 100,000 people were able to safely go home for 300 days, and the infection to the local communication in Seoul was prevented. Second, carefully disinfection. Since the end of February last year, the time the alert level to red was raised. The highest level to the highest level of disinfection measures to public transportation has been conducted. In subway stations, major facilities such as waiting rooms and platforms were disinfected up to 4 times more often than before the outbreak. Thus, SMD shortened the operation time after midnight to secure more time for the disinfection. As for buses, handles, chairs, and drop-off bags that people easily touch in the bus was disinfected every time buses return to public garage. It's been a year. We still have been highly intensive cleaning and disinfection measures to keep Seoul public transportation safe from the COVID-19. Lastly, scientific management of infection based on big data. First of all, quick diagnosis and self-quarantine by identifying the confirmed routes and contacts would be the key to preventing spreading the virus. In detail, SMG was able to respond proactively by conducting intensive medical investigation, tracing the routes of the confirmed, monitoring their contacts, and doing the extensive tests for people nearby areas to confirmed and contact visited. For this process, transaction data from transportation, credit card, and access data from telecommunication-based stations were mainly used. These achievements are the result of not individual of a single organization, but support for each other and cooperation. More of the efforts we made brought back the trust in Seoul public transportation as the main transport means of Seoul citizens. Thank you.
Okay, so Director Kang, I think it's I believe still the public transportation service in Seoul City is working quite well. Okay, and especially the people are observing the taking the masks quite well. Okay, even in the very crowded train as well. You see, so I think that is a quite successful effort. Of the Seoul City government to keep the public transportation moving quite well, I think. Thank you. Let's go to the Almud. I think World Bank. Can you explain what is the general activities of the World Bank, especially in the transport practice unit, about the how to respond to pandemic in transport sector. Also, at the same time, can you explain about what is the necessity of the international cooperation and international solidarity to cope with the pandemic? In a very in the future, I think. Okay, please.
Oh, just a tiny question for me, right?
You can.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's a pleasure to be.
I think it's the World Bank's role, World Bank's activities.
I'll do it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I will do. Thank you so much. No, and it's a pleasure to be collaborating with you, with MOLIT, with KOTI, Seoul City Government. Always a pleasure for the World Bank to be interacting. And as you know, Seoul City was one of the first cities we put on a learning session early on in the pandemic for other city governments not only in this region, but also in other regions, to quickly learn from how you keep public transport open, how you keep it safe and working. The other cities and some other cities in China as well, and Singapore, where I currently live, is also doing remarkably well, I must say, in keeping public transport safe and open throughout the whole period. That was quite impressive. In terms of the World Bank, I mean, I can focus on East Asia and the Pacific, and I think the interesting thing here is we're dealing with so different impacts across the region. It has hit countries in such a different way that we have to have very different measures. So the World Bank itself has a framework. COVID is looked at, first of all, focus on saving lives, then move towards protecting social protection and job security, and then build back better. And that comes sort of in stages. And I think in many countries in this region, we have now pretty much in transport, at least, we're focusing now on building back better as well, right? Because a number of the countries have actually contained the virus more or less, and so that's the idea. In the Pacific, as you know, the problem is cutting off the countries from entry basically meant nothing came in and out anymore, no transport at all. And so for them, the discussion of future mobility has sort of much more of a lifeline discussion than in any of the other countries that we've had. And there we're discussing how you revive the airline sector, which airlines will survive, and what does that mean for some countries that are completely dependent on an airline from the neighboring country. So it's a very, very different discussion from what we have and the way we are looking into the future and how we can help the country revive. Then you go to countries in the region that you're very familiar with, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. Interestingly, in Vietnam, because Vietnam has done so remarkably well in dealing with the virus so far, really contained it so early on, I get a sense that the impetus to change was maybe less there, or is less there than, say, in the Philippines or Indonesia that were so hard hit. In many ways. So Indonesia and Philippines, the cities have locked down, and it was very impressive to see that Manila used the opportunity of the lockdown. I mean, when have you ever been to Manila and Manila was empty? Manila empty don't come together ever. So they've used the time to try out bike lanes, to improve on non-motorized transport. So there's a lot of innovation coming because of that space that is there. Similarly, you can go to tourist cities in Cambodia and Laos. You go to Siem Reap near Angkor Wat, also empty right now, right? It's a good opportunity for the city government to rethink how public transport can work in the future when the country opens up again and the tourists come back. And the same in Laos. So we're working closely with those city governments to think through that. There's a lot of interest in a different system, definitely in decarbonizing transport and this sort of framework of, avoid unnecessary trips and shift more towards public transport, which not in all countries in the region is the norm, and then improve the fuel efficiency going forward. And I think a lot of the mainland Asian countries can learn a lot from Korea, obviously, even if the digital, say, revolution or era is not as advanced. There's still a lot to do, even with less, at a lower level of technology to start with, in order to improve. So there's a lot happening in the logistics sector. We see quite a number of, logistics marketplaces coming together to stop trucks from going one way empty. Vietnam has quite a few, private initiatives going on there. And so we see quite a lot of demand from the countries to learn and to quickly adapt, and definitely a shift towards public transport, which is encouraging, I feel. Maybe I'll leave it at that, and later on we can discuss in more detail some of the initiatives that we're doing. But I definitely do see good opportunities for future work and for a different type of transport. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're saying within the Asia Pacific countries, there are various impacts and various measures for each country. I think so. Yes. Thank you for your discussion. I move to the Professor Hwang. I think it's you know quite about the importance of the Korean New Deal. I think, can you say something about the successful implementation of the Korean New Deal and also the role of the human resources development, I think, okay? Yeah. And also, if you have time, maybe some the collaboration with the World Bank and ITF in the future for the developing countries. I'm sorry that there is a time is very limited, so the very precisely discussing. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Probably I can answer only a few because of time limitation.
Yeah.
I think as Korean government announced the Korean New Deal last year to revive the COVID-19 stricken economy, it decided to focus its investment on data, network, and AI as a core area of digital New Deal project. Government has decided to support the establishment of AI graduate schools nationwide to foster AI talent quickly and to increase support for software-oriented university projects that have lasted for years. The interesting thing is Samsung Electronics pays 1,000 education participants a year by free to train talented people to work in the software field, regardless of their university majors. And together, Seoul City also announced to operate a coding school to help job seekers receive free education without any financial burden. Yeah, I think if our Korean New Deal turns out to be really success, maybe we can cooperate with other countries and with cities and World Bank to just communicate our experiences and disseminate our experiences to other countries. Thank you.
I think this year, maybe the with the ITF and with the World Bank, we might share the experience, the experience of the Korean New Deal project, if anything meaningful. So Steve, do you have any particular plan about the future collaboration, especially for the developing countries from the ITF?
Well, we're doing it in addition to the work, the standard work that's ongoing, which I can say a few things about. We're always open to additional collaborative projects to try and bring useful experience from around our member countries to collaborate with any country in the world. I mean, not just our member countries. We're now 62 member countries. Colombia, we hope, will be joining very shortly. So we're a diverse community, not just the rich countries club and our origins. But yeah, there is a lot of scope, particularly where a government like yours wants to engage with providing support in a multilateral context rather than just bilaterally. And I think the issues that we need to address on public transport in particular, where Dr. Hwang was just talking about the Green Deal and more generally across our countries, we're all looking at green packages to relaunch economic activity. And at the highest levels, national level, we're looking at debt restructuring. What we can't do is immediately getting into the debts that have been accumulated by public transport operators being then a handicap on them being able to operate and make the investments they need to make to provide secure public transport as we go forward with more emphasis on creating conditions that conform to what we're trying to do on the health side with viruses. So they can't be faced with this triple burden of a drop in passengers, additional expense, and an accumulation of debt that they're asked to repay. Clearly, the taxpayer is the only person responsible, able to take on this burden. In the same way that we're going to have some debt restructuring and debt forgiveness for countries across the world. So on this, what changes with the new mobility services? I think one of the big differences is we have the potential to have a lot more actors involved in offering services and providing services. But we have potentially this bigger range, but the public policy issues really don't change. for example, in urban areas where public transport and new mobility forms of public transport are really the key to a functioning city and to getting people to work, to the labor market. Public space is a scarce commodity, and the metropolitan transport authorities, the local governments need to continue to manage the basic planning core route networks and services that meet the public goals. And these are delivering the services, particularly to people that don't have alternatives, people that depend on public transport for their livelihoods and for getting to work. So we need to avoid unnecessary regulation. I mean, the tendency of a lot of, especially at the local level of government, is if it moves, let's regulate it, because that's what we do. But a lot of times you don't actually need to regulate private initiative that's trying to deliver better services, particularly in this digital area. Where you need to regulate is where there are problems with the traditional areas of potential abuse of monopoly power, of somebody using their incumbent position to block the entry of new innovative services, as well as the management of public space. So we need to follow best practice in what's new, but also in what's old. And this comes back to the way that concessions for operating public transport services are organized. And I think the place to keep our eye on at the moment is Santiago, where the national government of Chile, the Ministry of Transport, has just completed a reform of their concession, the bus concession system in Santiago, where the national government's actually responsible for what happens locally. And they've taken the best of London, Singapore, and they've introduced it in a much tougher environment of a middle-income country. And it promises to deliver a fantastic improvement in the quality of service and has facilitated a huge investment in electric vehicles. I think even a city like Seoul, where you have, as you said earlier, fantastic quality of service at a very reasonable cost, I know you still have some legacy problems in the way that the property rights for running concessions were distributed many generations ago, and they still hinder the progress of the Metropolitan Transport Authority and the local governments in trying to have more coordinated services that deliver better for the population. And I think you could also benefit from looking to what Santiago's been doing, but this is true across the world. But the bus systems are the core of our urban mobility, and there's a lot that's still, kind of old-fashioned, out of date, and needs refreshing. And in a lot of places is an obstacle for introducing new mobility services and generally improving quality of service.
Okay, thank you very much for very wide spectrum of the advice. I think it's the director Lee. There is one question to you actually. So because of the time limited, so I will give you a question from the participant, and then you may answer the question, and also you may add something if you like. Very interesting point that many rental car companies in Jeju Island agreed to adapt the CITS. I was wondering how Jeju government, rental companies are reached an agreement in public-private data sharing. Data sharing is the key issue. Data sharing through CITS. Can you explain about answer the question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can answer the question. But we are having here the director Kang here, and now I'm speaking about Jeju. It's kind of there's a very fantastic program going on in Seoul too. But because the question was about Jeju, so I'm gonna introduce the case of Jeju. So. Okay. It's like that. The CITS system is not just for the automated vehicles. It can also support conventional vehicles, because if they have those onboard units inside of the vehicle, then they can get the information. So, and what happened in Jeju is that we commissioned the project to Jeju government. And who was in charge was the Jeju regional police. and they're in charge of the signals on every intersections, and they just connected those signals, and they're now giving out those the signals real time. So, and all the vehicles equipped with this unit can get all the signals in the remaining times. It's very helpful. And at the first, at early stage, the rental car companies are not really convinced with this scheme, so they are not really want to equip this the unit, because they thought that could affect their kind of the car price when they want to sell the used cars. So, but after a while, then the people actually the tourists coming to Jeju give a good kind of response that, oh, it was very convenient and it was really helpful. So after that, those tourists now it's kind of wanna kind of those the vehicles equipped with the CITS system. So, and then those rental car companies are now coming to the national police and those projects. So, and then asking for giving out more units, because it's subsidized. Because we are actually, when we commissioned the project, we are actually giving them budget to equip those units at subsidized prices. So that's what happened, and it goes very well. And Seoul government has the similar project, and the Seoul government actually wanna expand this signal sharing scheme. And the other thing is that we have the same similar project in Ulsan and Gwangju too, but they started last year, so they are now still construction is going on to install the roadside units. So yeah.
Okay.
That's what
I think you said that the MOLIT, the Korean government of land infrastructure transport, is doing a lot of demonstration project or living project with the local government. So what is actually the good relationship or the better relationship, cooperation between the central government and the local government in implementation, testing of the future mobility, something like this? Do you have any on that? Yeah.
I think it's kind of two ways. So not just the central government, the cooperation from the regional government is very important. So it's like how willing they are kind of take the risk of having automated vehicles on their road is kind of the most important thing. And they're kind of Seoul government and Gyeonggi province and all those the regional governments actually wanna promote their region as kind of top-notch innovative region. I don't know why it's kind of this in Korea, but everybody wanna be branding their region as kind of the most innovative region. So it's very popular actually in Korea. So, and the other thing is important to having the cooperation from the local governments and regional governments, that the relationship with the conventional transportation operators, because those taxi operators and the bus operators, they're worried that these automated vehicles one day replace themselves. So the regional governments actually manage those the operators, so they are now should be a channel to having dialogues, and so that's why we are always going with regional governments to having this kind of the demonstrations or the pilot projects.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the Director Kang. I think there is one question to you, actually. Actually, there are many questions, but because of the time limitation, we don't all of them. Seoul was one of the, as you already discussed, Seoul was one of the first cities to not go for the strict social distancing in mass transit, and it has worked quite well. On what basis was this decision made? I mean, what is your decision-making process, or what is the behind such well performing? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your questions. We learned from the experience of medicine. So we decided that the mask is the first measure not to stop public transportation. And we encouraged the people to wear a mask in the early stage of the pandemic through massive campaign. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Almud, I think it's about a month ago, last year, the World Bank very much emphasized the importance of the income polarization. I mean the poverty problem as well in developing countries, actually, and in that respect, I think it's the transportation service is very important, especially for poor working class. I think. What is your general guidelines or general policies for the working class people, poor working class people in developing countries, actually in the era of pandemic era?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think we have generalized, general guidelines. So, but obviously, that is one of our biggest worries. That actually the pandemic, what it's leading to, is obviously an even bigger income gap and a further polarization between the rich and the poor. Right? Those living, those with lower income usually have jobs that many people cannot do them from home. So telecommuting is not an option. They are the ones having to expose themselves to go from A to B, and this is how infections are rising. So we're very much aware of that. Some of this cannot be addressed tomorrow. So I think a lot of it depends then on how to make the transport routes that people take as safe as possible. As our colleague from the Seoul government said, use of mask, mandatory social distancing as feasible. But of course, I mean, there are many places where this is reaching a limit, and we see the limits right now. We see that very clearly. I think going forward, this will be one of the areas that need to be addressed. I mean, in a way, digitalization of countries, which is a big, big topic. And you probably all know we have this digital moonshot initiative for Africa in particular. I mean, digitalization will really, really help many countries going forward to also keep people safer in the future, right? If there was more access, you could do more things from home. And you have seen in some countries where digitalization wasn't very advanced or wasn't used by many people, all of a sudden, there was a big leap and a big jump. As long as the technology was feasible, people have actually really also started to do a lot more online and do fewer trips. So it still worries us. I think it's not something that we have found the solution to. It really comes down to individually, as Stephen also pointed out, looking at the particular situation in cities and working with the system and really reforming the bus systems. I mean, at the end of the day, one of you, I think Stephen was also the one saying, back to the roots, right? What do you need to fix in many countries still? Is first of all the bus system before you do a lot of fancy other developments. So for now, I think that's something that many governments have realized, and we're working very closely with them in order to help advance that as quickly as possible going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We're out of time, so I won't proceed.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind explanation. I think the Korean government announced the so-called the 2050 the CO2. The greenhouse gas emission net zero, okay, by 2050. So, Professor Hwang, can you say something about the something like the activities in transport sector in relation to the 2050 net zero actually announcement?
Okay.
One minute.
Yeah. Maybe in order to make a 2050 net zero goal, it is very important to reduce the fossil fuel based personal passenger vehicles. But it is not easy. In order to make it happen, we have to really restrict use of passenger vehicles and encourage public transportation users. And also we have to shift the people from private automobiles to public transportation or e-bike or e-scooter, sort of like alternative mode of transportation. Furthermore, this concerted effort will be making us reach out to the goals of 2050 net zero in the future.
Thank you. In relation to the 2050 the CO2 net zero announcement, I would like to have a kind of the joint seminar with the ITF and the World Bank and the Korean institutions, maybe in this year, maybe in Leipzig or in Washington or in Edinburgh. Hopefully, I think time is almost 10:30, so I have to end this session. Actually, I think it's still the COVID-19 pandemic is going on. It's not finished yet, so we have to go through another still hard time, I think. But in general, the future mobility and also the pandemic responding is the same issue, I think. So we can overcome this pandemic in transport sector with what is the solidarity, international solidarity and the cooperation, also the technological innovation as well. I'm sorry, the time is very limited, but tonight our topic is very wide. So the future mobility is very wide topic actually. So I have to finish here, and then I'm very happy to have this joint the session between the World Bank and the ITF of OECD and also the 3 Korean the government and the Seoul Metropolitan government and also the KOTI. Thank you very much for your wonderful comment discussions. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.